Welcome to the Law Firm Lab by MB Law Firm Consulting.
Welcome to the Law Firm Lab by MB Law Firm Consulting. We are the show where we explore how law firms grow smarter, scale sustainably, and lead with clarity. So I'm Margaret Burke, and today I am very excited to be kicking off our first guest, Elisa Silverglade, Director of Automation for Techromatic. Elisa is a robotic automation specialist, and she helps law firms use technology, streamline their processes to save time, reduce headaches, and reduce repetitive tasks. So we're going to let her speaking in a moment, and I'm sure you're all excited to hear more. Before we jump in, I just want to give some background. So the rise of AI and automation is essential in law firms. I'm sure everyone here in the audience has been talking about it and hearing about it, but is wondering what it is. So it's necessary for law firms to really stay ahead, not just work faster, but to be able to create better systems for your clients in your team, improve accuracy, and free up the lawyers and staff to then focus on high-level work. Elisa and her team at Techromatic have worked with firms of all sizes. They pretty much help identify bottlenecks. They design smart workflows. They implement tools, and they do much more. Specifically, they focus on RPA, robotic process automation, which I'm not going to say again in today's podcast, thankfully. Let's say RPA. And they really focus on making daily operations run smoother, especially during critical moments. And the area we're going to focus on today is client onboarding. Every firm we work with wants to improve their client onboarding process for many reasons. So today we're going to dive into this exact topic and really focus on how Elisa and her company help save a lot of time and help firms ensure a seamless client experience. So Elisa, finally, thank you for being here. We would love to hear more about you, what you do, and then jump in.
Great. Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be your first guest on this podcast. So I really appreciate that. My background is I like to say I'm a recovering law firm office manager. So I managed a small law firm for over 15 years, and now I utilize that experience with my expertise in robotic process automation to work with law firms to basically uncover where their biggest bottlenecks are, how we can optimize those processes and automate them.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing your background. And I absolutely love recovering law firm manager because I'm also a recovering law firm manager. So I understand what you're saying. That's amazing.
If you know, you know.
Yeah. And if you know, you know. And it really helps because you understand your clients, because it is the law firm professionals and managers that do tend to drive initiatives forward for the attorneys at the firms. So you understand some of the areas they need help with. So we'd like to begin with asking a question of all our guests. So Elisa, can you please share with us in your professional life, what is the worst piece of advice you have ever received?
Oh, wow. I guess the worst piece of advice is anybody who says, just get it done. It's that just get it done. Just do it quickly. Don't worry about it. Don't think about it.
Yeah.
And for most things that I've encountered professionally and personally, that's pretty bad advice. Like some things you need to be intentional. You need to be mindful. You need to have a robust perspective and do things with intention.
Yeah. Thank you. I so agree. And frankly, as someone who's worked in law firms for many years, we both know that can be part of a culture where just figure it out, get it done. Sometimes the just figure it out is a good exercise because you learn, but other times the just get it done means you end up going back to redo it, and sometimes cause bigger problems. So that's a great segue. So Elisa, please, from your experience, what would you say the biggest bottlenecks law firms face during the processes like client onboarding?
The biggest bottlenecks are almost always focused on the manual behavior part of a task. So the question I typically ask folks is, where's the most muck in the gears of your machine? And if you look at it that way and you look at, where are the most bottlenecks, it's usually manual behavior. It's having to copy and paste, upload and download, generate documents, fill out forms, filing forms, things that are rote exercises that don't really require expertise, but they're very time consuming.
Right. That makes sense. And from that, what would you say? Could you give us some examples of some of the easiest processes, things that are easy to automate? What can you automate?
Absolutely. So when we want to automate, we're looking to check a number of boxes. We want the process to be repetitive, standardized, rules-based. In other words, it's not like up to nuance or context or figuring something out, but rather if this, then that. Very straightforward. We want the process to either be very high in volume or very time consuming, because those are where we're going to deliver the most value for automation. We need the process to be well understood. So a company that's just starting out and isn't really quite sure how they're going to effectuate the work, not a great candidate. We're looking for organizations where they really know what they need to do to get the work done. And we are looking for things that are very straightforward. So we always want to start an automation relationship with a project that is very straightforward and it's going to deliver immediate impact without having to be overly complex. So things that make things more complicated, or the more technologies that are involved, the more times a human needs to be in the loop for oversight. These are the things that add to complexity.
So if we were to stick to the client onboarding as an example, like, can you share some examples of how you've helped firms with their client onboarding process? And some specifics would help the audience understand.
Yeah, absolutely. So most firms, and not just law firms, like, most businesses will go through an onboarding process that can often involve collecting data from the new client. And that might happen over a series of emails or phone calls. The client may send documents all at once or in bursts. And then typically you have a human who is responsible for processing all of that information, for copying and pasting into a case management software, into financial software. Larger firms may have a help desk or a portal where somebody's getting registered on. There may be a welcome package that's sent out, more requests for more documents or information. And all of this stuff is rules based. So these are all things that can be automated. And what we're talking about specifically as to how do we help? Well, for one thing, and this is a great tip for anyone, regardless of whether you're not going to invest in automation, but if you are currently collecting information via email or conversations, please consider moving to a web form. When you use a web form, you invite the client to fill out all the information you need, and then you essentially are creating a database of those responses. So whether or not you want to automate, you now have that data in a structured way, which makes it very easy for a person or a robot to copy and paste from that into the various systems. So that's kind of like one way that we optimize. But the automation, the robotic process automation, will integrate with whatever's on the computer. So however the client is doing it individually, we just look to optimize that process before we automate it.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. And there's so much value in, automation in forms. And, a lot of law firms, a lot of businesses, I'll focus on law firms. Because that's both our background, there is such a personal element in the lawyers working with their clients. And can you share, are there tips on how, if we stay focused on onboarding, how a firm that implements RPA/automation can also keep it personal and warm at the same time?
Yeah, and the key there is the discernment of where to use your human resources and where to use automation. So we're not going to ever recommend that you replace, or that a law firm replaces, an in-person intake call with some sort of form, or any of that human contact, quite frankly. I think that it's important to be cognizant that in law, no matter what kind of law a firm is practicing, the clients are experiencing some level of anxiety, right? It might be highly anxious if it's something personal like a divorce or family law, or it may be, more transactional and corporate law, but it's an anxiety producing event to seek legal counsel. There's a lot of money on the line and other important things at stake. So I think it's very important for law firms to maintain that human connection where their clients can feel nurtured and handheld to whatever degree is appropriate without sacrificing that relationship. So the key to automation there is, what are the things that aren't about humanity that we can automate so that your humans have plenty of time to do the human work? And so that's really the key. So if it's a situation where intake is in person, maybe it's not the client filling out the form. Maybe it's the attorney who fills out the form, or the paralegal who fills out the form after the interview, and then all of the document production gets automated and all of the onboarding into systems gets automated. And that way you're automating, the back office, the paperwork, the busy work, not the human work.
Thank you. Yeah, I've had the benefit of meeting with you many times over the past year and watching a lot of demos. And I think it would be helpful for the audience to understand, and if you could verbally show this without showing it on your screen, like how in the workflow with RPI, there is always we'll call it the robot, and then there's the human mixed in with the workflow. Can you sort of give a high level view of that so that our audience can understand exactly what this looks like?
Absolutely. So one thing that puts a finer point on it is understanding that the robot operates as a separate entity. So it is just software. We call it the robot, but it's really just software. It lives on the computer, but it has a dedicated workstation. It has its own email address and its own credentials to access technology. So it functions like a separate entity. And then we automate all the automatable parts in a larger process. So for example, for one of my estate planning clients who practices a lot of probate, we built a robot that essentially does about 4 hours of probate administration work in just about 8 minutes. How? Well, the attorney will get an email that has a death certificate attached and forward it to the bot, email it to the bot. The bot will assign the paralegal and lawyer team. The bot will extract data from the death certificate, put it in a database as a placeholder, and email the paralegal, please do intake for this new client. So the paralegal will do the human intake, fill out this database form, and click save. And now the bot is going to log into their case management software, copy and paste all the data from the database into the CMS, and generate the documents. Now the document generation is automatic already. We don't need to rebuild it. We just have the robot click the buttons, because that's a bunch of tedious work generating 20 documents and saving them. So the bot is doing all that and then inviting the paralegal for human review. Then the bot pushes all the documents through DocuSign for the client to sign it. And when that happens, the bot invites the attorney for final review. And then the attorney signs off. And now the bot heads over to the eCourt website to actually file the case and then update all the records accordingly. So there's plenty of opportunity for a human to be in the loop for approval, oversight, purchasing, decision making, whatever we need. And then we just automate around it. So obviously this is work. I say 8 minutes, but it's 8 minutes taking place over, several weeks, let's say. But that's an example of how we automate the parts of the process that can be automated, and we leave humans in for the human work.
Yeah, that's a great example. And towards the end of our program, Elisa will give her contact information, but to join her and see the visual of this is fascinating. And so thank you for sharing that example. So we're speaking with lawyers, right? And there's a lot of privacy concerns. There's a lot of talk about AI, bots, people that commingle in automation. Can you share some best practices and steps that your clients and your company takes to ensure that the program, meets legal, ethical and data privacy requirements?
Yes, absolutely. So first of all, Techromatic has been around for over 17 years, founded on a core of cybersecurity. And we've always specialized in regulated industries. So keeping folks in compliance, high levels of security has always been, the core of our services, and continues to be as we embark into automation. So that's kind of our background. As far as the technology goes, when we're talking about robotic process automation, the robots are as secure as the client's systems, because the bots themselves are not actually collecting, storing, or transferring any data. They're basically, moving things around with copying and pasting and saving and naming and stuff like that. And so there isn't a security concern. The bot does not have the ability to, do something other than what it's been programmed to do. How is this different from AI is a question that, I'm trying to answer like all the time, because there is, everybody wants to lump it in together. And I feel like most people are talking about AI, and I'm kind of the lonely one always talking about automation, because with AI, there's so much concern. There's ethical concern, there's hallucinations. When you have a technology model that is supposedly, automating something, but that random mistakes could happen at any time for any reason, then you are embarking on a solution that will require every piece of output to be double checked, right? Because you never know when that mistake is going to happen. And that's not really the case with RPA. With RPA, it is according to a set of rules and parameters. It's not going to vary. We can get consistent execution and 100% accuracy.
That's excellent. Thank you. Do you know, I did not realize that your company's background was in security, or is in security. So
Yeah,
that's,
cybersecurity, help desk, all that, IT managed
wow.
services.
Yeah, that's amazing. So a lot of firms during their onboarding on their wish list is capturing the information from a CRM. This comes up all the time. Folks have potential clients in a CRM, and the client company moves forward. Can the bot help in those situations when the CRM doesn't always connect to the practice management system?
Yes, and that's actually a perfect use case for RPA. Is really anytime you have a couple of different technologies that aren't talking to each other, there's a
Yeah.
lot of manual behavior and kind of reconciling that information. So yes, the technology will integrate with anything that's on the computer, old or new. So if a person can sit at the computer and effectuate the work with a keyboard and mouse, then the bot can do that as well. So it's just a matter of building the bot to understand what it needs to do with the data from the CRM and how to move it into the case management software and what needs to be done. So, and we can even get, more expansive, where, what kind of documents need to be generated, what kind of documents need to be requested, when should a meeting be scheduled, like all kinds of other things. Okay, and that's a big component also of like the onboarding automation. For example, we have a small estate planning firm who is very low tech. They really only use Microsoft Office components for the most part, but they have a
Mm-hmm.
mature process for onboarding prospects and generating documents and getting out the right questionnaire and then putting the prospect into the right bucket of tasks depending on the type of case. So we've
Mm-hmm.
automated all of that for them. So it wasn't, it's pretty low tech in terms of their landscape, but it was just this very manual process that can be automated. So we can really work with a client wherever they are.
Yeah, that's great. It sounds like you work with firms that are not tech savvy, obviously folks that are tech savvy, and different size firms. Is that correct?
Yes, everything in between. My smallest client, like I said, is a husband and wife estate planning team with 3 support staff. And my largest client is an over 300-person firm, personal injury firm out in Colorado. So
Okay.
it's really just the circumstance of the firm. What is the nature and volume of the work they're producing, and where can we provide value with automation?
Right. Yeah, my next question, it's somewhat subjective. So I guess if you could just give a few quick examples, maybe using the very small to the larger firm in Colorado. But when can firms typically see the ROI, return on investment, for working with you in your company?
So it kind of depends on where the value is, and it does shift from firm to firm. So sometimes once we automate, we cut the amount of money spent on that task dramatically. And other times, the bigger ROI is how that time is reinvested for the human. So especially for law firms, right, you're looking at attorneys or senior level paralegals, people who are highly paid, highly skilled. Chances are, if we free up 2, 3, 4, 5 hours a day for that person, they can apply that time to higher value work, which is then going to be also more fulfilling, but that can be a much bigger ROI.
Right.
Also, the ROI is in the ability to scale. companies will reach, critical mass of a diminishing return of hiring another human to do more paperwork, right? That's the old model. So now it's like, what can you automate so that you can actually take on more and more work without overtaxing your humans? And how can you do that effectively so that the humans that you do bring on to your team, you're bringing on for their humanity and their uniqueness and not how well they can enter data from 9 to 5.
Right. Okay. Thank you. So that's bringing us to the end of our program today. And we always like to end with the same question. Could you please share with us the best piece of advice you've ever received?
So this is interesting because I remember the words verbatim, but I can't remember exactly where I saw them. It was in high school and it had to do with a guidance counselor. I don't know if the guidance counselor told me or if it was a poster on the wall, but I always remember this phrase: say what you mean what you say, and say it to the person it's meant for. And I know that that is not necessarily relevant to automation or law firms, but I feel like it is the best life advice that I've ever gotten. That is kind of what leads to a sense of true authenticity: is say what you mean what you say, and say it to the person it's meant for.
That's really excellent advice. Thank you for sharing that. So thank you so much for sharing your time with us today and your insights. I know a lot of law firm leaders, will walk away with some practical ideas from what you shared today. They will likely also be very curious about learning more as it relates to their specific practices. Can you please share, how can people reach out to you?
Absolutely. So first, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, Elisa Silverglade. My email is Elisa, ELISA, @techromatic.com. You can reach me at 914-362-8000.
Excellent. Thank you. So again, everyone, thank you for joining the Law Firm Lab by MB Law Firm Consultant. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow us, rate us, and tune in to our next episode, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, I'm Margaret Burke, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and leave us a review in the comments.